We have a first leak slash look at the potential of what the PlayStation 6 is going to be and what they have in store for us for the next generation, a console, a handheld. So some interesting stuff there. Xbox adds some games to Game Pass for August, quietly adds these games as well as they've added a bunch of new games to the Stream Your Own Game service, which is always good. Nintendo raises the prices of the Nintendo Switch 1 plus accessories in the United States. A lot of people are talking about that, but their sales for the Nintendo Switch 2 are absolutely phenomenal. But before we do get into it, if you do enjoy daily gaming news and content, make sure to hit the subscribe, share, like, all of that stuff. But for now, let's get into it. So the Xbox Stream Your Own Game service is something that Xbox has continuously added to and improved upon for the last number of months. I think it is going to be one of their main things here that they continuously try to use to bridge the gap between Xbox consoles and PCs, as they are trying to make that ecosystem all in one place where no matter where you're playing, you're getting access to everything that you do own. Games that you won't be able to natively download and play on the PC, specifically the ones that are tied to the console, I still think you're going to get access to those in one way or another, whether they have it through emulation, which I think is something they potentially are going to try to work on here to get games to run on the PC, or it will be this here, which is the Stream Your Own Games. And they continuously are adding games to this service, as we have 100 new games that are being added here to the Xbox Stream Your Own Game service. And I'll quickly go over them just so you know. If you own these games, you can go ahead, jump in and play them wherever you are, on your phone, on your PC, whatever. And it's just a very good feature. I've actually used it quite a bit since they really did add that in, specifically on my phone, like on a lunch break at work, or just out and I have 30 minutes to jump into a game. It's not a game that's in Game Pass. I jump in and play with Stream Your Own Game. Assassin's Creed Shadows is one of those games that I've actually used a lot on this service. But here are the games that are coming. There's 100 of them. I'm not going to go through them all because it would take way too long for me to read through this list. And I don't think you guys want to sit here and listen to me go through naming out 100 games. But it's all over the place, the games that they are adding to the Stream Your Own Games. Big games, small games, indie games, old games, newer games. Like, it is all over the place if you go through here and see what is available. But you'll know as soon as you jump in to your Xbox app on your PC or through any browser whatsoever, and you're going through it, it'll show right away whether that game is playable via stream and whether it's in Game Pass or if it's one that you do own. So very happy that they are doing this. I hope they continue to add more games on a continuous basis. It looks like this is what their plan is, and they will. But I still do hope in the background that they are really sitting back and thinking about how they can mesh the ecosystem into one, where if you want, you have that choice to still download these games that you currently own on your console. If you can download them on your PC, you can download them on the Xbox handhelds that are going to be coming out. You can obviously, we'll be able to download them on the next Xbox and everything, plus Steam games and all that stuff. It just sounds like a phenomenal future here in the Xbox ecosystem. But more games are added here, 100 new games added for August. And there's still maybe more that do come in August, because generally when they give us the Game Pass announcements, they are slowly adding more in there in smaller batches. So I wonder if we will see that as well with the next two announcements for Game Pass in August. August overall is just an insanely stacked month. Plus, we don't know exactly everything that is coming to Game Pass for the month. So there could be more things here that people are wanting to jump in and play. But Xbox, as they do, they quietly add games into the Game Pass service that weren't previously announced, and they just kind of put them in there. We got the Senders Next just recently, which was kind of shadow dropped into the service, but they are also here adding a new release to the 2025 Game Pass lineup. Not a big game, but it may interest some people here. It's Herdling. This is coming August 21st, and they say Herdling is a brand new adventure from Okomotive, creators of the atmospheric and acclaimed Far games, and Panic, publishers of Firewatch, which I believe I played Far, which was decent, but I did play Firewatch, which I did very much enjoy. And they say head out on a grand alpine expedition with a herd of lovable beasts as you ascend a mountain path, encounter eerie dangers and surprising obstacles, and forge your way to the mystery at the summit. So it is going to be an adventure game, and it is going to be I would say more of a experience style of game if it is anything like Firewatch, which was a very cool one with an interesting story. So that one is coming here August 21st to Xbox Game Pass. It is a day one game added into the service just out of nowhere. And this happens. And you have to think that these deals just kind of come out of nowhere for these developers and publishers who are looking at getting more people to experience and figure out that their game is out there and able to be played. Game Pass does a very, very good job at that. All right, next generation. We've heard all about Xbox. We pretty much know what they're doing with the whole ecosystem thing, with the release of multiple handhelds. I think we're going to get multiple handhelds from different manufacturers. I think we're also going to get multiple consoles, a big first party one from Xbox, which the current leak specs that are out there makes the one coming from Xbox themselves sound just very powerful and looks like it's going to be giving you the best experience in playing games at the highest end. And then I think there will be other Xbox consoles from OEMs who come out from like Asus and Lenovo and stuff and just give you their own Xbox approved console where you can choose the specs that you want. You don't want to go spend $1,000 on a console. Maybe you want to spend 500 or 600. You'll get a console that is less powerful, but you will get that choice. So that to me, it sounds like a pretty good future here going forward for Xbox. But PlayStation, on the other hand, pretty much know they're just going to continue with what they do because their consoles themselves still sell very, very good. PS5, I think, is at like 80 million. It'll probably get close to 100 million before the end of the generation. So PS6 is going to continue with making one console, selling it, and then seeing how that does. But I also do believe we will be seeing a handheld from PlayStation, and we have some information here about the PS6 and the potential handheld. The PS6, it may not be going in the direction that people are expecting, and I think potentially they're doing this because they don't want to subsidize the cost anymore, but still want to make it affordable. As the specs are coming out for the PS6, and it's looking not as powerful as you may be expecting. They do say here that YouTube channel Moore's Law is Dead dropped a massive video on August 1st with information on how powerful the PS6 and the PS6 handheld are and potential price information and more overall about what we can expect here from PlayStation going into the next gen. And it says here, PS6 early leak, brutal price below PS5 Pro, which would be surprising to me if this is true because I'm expecting the next gen base price, the starting price, to be at the price of the current PlayStation 5 Pro. I'd be shocked if the PS6 comes in at a lower price, but he's saying here it could be the case. And he says, anyone remember the PlayStation 4? It was a console that made the choice to not go all out in specs so that it could have mass market appeal after the previous generation left some people feeling burned with how expensive it was at its launch. And it says, I'll just say it, from what I've seen behind the scenes so far, at least it appears Sony is planning to do this sort of strategy again with the PlayStation 6. Now, with the PS4 and the Xbox One, they were both underpowered right at launch. But the PS4 specifically, they were coming off a PlayStation 3 generation that started very slow. And it was because of the price. And it was because they went with the cell processor on the PlayStation 3 that took a while for developers to understand how to use this before it was able to get the best results. I mean, if you remember The Last of Us that released at the very end of the generation on the PlayStation 3, just how insane that game looked and how it still looks pretty good today. That was taking the full power of the PS3, but it took almost an entire generation to be able to pull the power out of that thing. And the PS3 didn't start off very well in terms of sales. It did end up selling decently well by the end of the generation, but it didn't start well. The Xbox 360 was beating it for the majority of the generation. And obviously, Sony still had that advantage with the PS3 of selling in Japan way more than Xbox ever could sell in Japan. So that helped them push their console to decent sales. But with the PS4 and the PS5, they don't have that. They didn't have that problem at all. The consoles came out, they sold very, very well. PS5, again, this generation is selling very, very well. They don't have that problem, and they could come out with a console that is $500, $600, $700, and I think it would still sell relatively well. If you're just taking a look at even what the Nintendo Switch 2 has done with their pricing, as they increased the prices and still did well. So I don't know if it's a very good comparison. PS5 has had no issues in sales. It had no issues at the start of the generation, so not sure if that would play a major factor into them making this decision. But he is saying here that is kind of what they're doing, trying to get a lower spec console to give that mass appeal and try to sell as many units as possible right off of the bat. And he also goes on here to say that Sony is targeting a mid 2027 release, specifically fall 2027 or early 2028 for both the PS6 and the PS6 handheld. I believe that would be true. Those years make absolute sense because they just released the PS5 Pro, and from what we're hearing about the leak specs for the next Xbox, the first party one coming from Microsoft and Xbox themselves isn't going to hit till 2027, but there could be an OEM one that does drop in 2026. So they'll probably release in the similar time frame. But here's everything for the PlayStation 6 console. There's a chiplet design with some mention of possibly utilizing the Navi 5 desktop chiplets, backwards compatibility to the PS5 and the PS4 generations. No mention of the PS3. I mean, they just aren't spending the money or time to try to get PS3 backwards compatibility, probably because it's relatively hard with the completely different architecture in that console comparatively to PS4 and PS5. They say heavy emphasis on cost constraints and keeping power lower than PS5. Manufacturing plan for mid 2027 with a likely fall 2027 or early 2028 release date. 160 watt TBP, 8 Zen 6 or later cores, 40 to 48 RDNA 5 compute units at 3 gigahertz plus 160 bit or 192 bit bus with GDDR7 at 32 GT. Rasterization performance estimated to be 3 times the PS5. Ray tracing uplift expected to be higher. And because Canis is verified to be on a 3 nanometer and Magnus is on a 3 nanometer, it is believed this will be 3 nanometer as well. Magnus, I believe he is referring to the Xbox leak. That is Project Magnus, which is the next Xbox. And he says here, it's clear that PS6 Orion started as a chiplet design that looked kind of like an RDNA 3 layout, but it's also clear that AMD was trying to convince Sony to share dies with desktop. So it's very possible that the final design could use an AT3 or an AT like the Xbox Magnus. Therefore, it could end up getting more than 48 compute units, but likely the same or less than Xbox. So that is the console itself. Now, the power, if it does come in relatively low, we've already seen this play out with the Switch. Does it really matter that much if they're giving people a good experience? I think with PlayStation and Xbox, it matters significantly more than with the Nintendo Switch because you have a completely different demographic of people who are buying that console. However, if they are going to include something like a handheld with this console, and it's something that they're trying to sell basically together, it could have a different effect because that is one of the main draws of Nintendo. Why people give Nintendo a pass on power, one of the reasons at least, is it's a handheld and you can plug it in your TV. People look at it first and foremost as a handheld and something that you just plug in HDMI, and the fact that it isn't giving you the highest in graphics is reasonable. Now, PS6 Canis is the name of this handheld, and it says here it's a monolithic 3 nanometer die. And he says he was able to verify this in modern documents. Backwards compatibility to PS5 and PS4, of course. Canis includes a micro SD slot, an M.2 SSD slot, haptic vibration, dual mics, and a touchscreen. Specifically, a diagram states that the USB-C port has video out capabilities. Manufacturing is planned for mid 2027 with a likely fall 2027 or early 2028 release date. 15 watt TBP for Zen 6C cores, 12 to 20 RDNA 5 compute units at 1.6 to 2 gigahertz, 128 bit bus with LPDDR5X 7500 plus. Rasterization performance estimated to be around 0.5 the PS5, 0.5 times the PS5, expected to be higher than this, or the RT is expected to be higher than this. And then Canis should beat Xbox Ally X in performance, but it doesn't come off as a powerhouse. So again, all speculation, all rumors. We have no idea if any of this is true, but it is that time. We're a few years out from the release of the next Xbox and the PlayStation 6. You're going to get tons of rumors of people expecting what these consoles are going to have, the power, what will be included as features, all of those things. I do think, though, there will be handheld, and I do think there will be an at-home console. The question here is, how do they sell this thing? Are they going to be selling a console for like $600-$700 and then expect people to also go out and buy a handheld for $300-$500? Because the reality is that is basically taking what Xbox did this generation with the Series S and the Series X and giving two SKUs and expecting developers to have those games completely developed for both of them. Now, I think the Series S was fine. Most of the cases of games landing on the Series S, I think, are completely good. I mean, I was just playing Assassin's Creed Shadows on the Xbox Series S, and the game looks great and runs completely fine on that console itself. So I don't think it's nearly as big of an issue as some people do make it out to be. But when you have a competitor in Xbox that is going to give consumers just tons of different choices, at least at the sounds of it, from picking up a higher end console or a lower end console, it's all going to be basically PC style of settings, and they're only going to have to make one game for it. Will they want to have to make, again, in the next generation, the dual SKUs here for their games, when it seems like Xbox is going to be trying to make it easier for the developers and not harder? So we will see what it plays out here. Either way, the PlayStation 6 is going to sell well. The power isn't going to have a very big effect on how well the PS6 does sells. If we can look at the history and the data of how good the PS4 sold, how good the PS5 is selling, PS6 should follow because people are locked into the PlayStation ecosystem. All right. Nintendo Switch here. We'll end up talking some Nintendo Switch news here because this is hilarious. This happened in Canada actually about a month ago, and I had predicted that this was going to happen in the United States. It was just a matter of time. And this is the pricing update. The exact same thing they said and they did in Canada. They're doing it in the United States. They're changing the prices to the last generation, the Switch 1 plus the accessories for the Switch 1. They put out this statement here. We'll look at the statement and we'll go over what the prices are. Put out this statement here saying price for the original Nintendo Switch family of systems and products will change in the United States based on market conditions effective August 3rd, 2025. And I believe this is the same day that it started or is starting in Canada. They gave Canada about a month or so notice. They gave the United States 2 days notice, and this includes the Nintendo Switch OLED model, Nintendo Switch Lite, and select Nintendo Switch accessories. They also say other Nintendo products, including certain Nintendo Switch 2 accessories, select Amiibo, and the Nintendo Sound Clock Alarm will see adjustments. And pricing for the Switch 2 system, physical and digital Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2 games, as well as Nintendo Switch Online memberships, will remain unchanged at this time. But hey, maybe we'll see those go up as well. So they're raising the prices in the United States. Here are the new prices. This is based off of Target pricing API. The Pro controller is going from $70 to $80. The Joy-Con 1 is going from $80 to $90. The Joy-Con 2 looks like that's actually increasing in price too, going from $95 to $100. Joy-Con 2 strap, $14 to $15. The Switch 1 here, the one that came out in 2017, which is kind of hilarious. Think about that. They're raising the prices on this now. $300 to $340. The Switch OLED came out a few years after the Switch 1. $350 to $400. The Switch Lite, $200 to $230. The Switch 1 AC adapter, $300 to $35. The Joy-Con charging stand, $30 to $35. So all of these are getting price increases. Last generation consoles coming out here from Nintendo and saying, yeah, we're going to keep our current gen prices the same, even though they're already higher than what people had expected. And we're going to raise the prices of the last gen. And there's a couple of reasons why I think they are doing this. One would be they are probably trying to push more people over to the Nintendo Switch 2. And they're looking at the Switch 1 already sold like 150 plus million units. And they're thinking, we want to transfer as many of these people over as possible. Developers probably don't want to develop as much on the Switch 1 anymore. It is old tech. It already came out underpowered, and more games are going to be coming out for the Switch 2. That's where you want to lock people into the ecosystem. It's a lot more digital. There's the game key cards. I think the Switch 2 is going to have a far bigger digital footprint than the Nintendo Switch 1 did. So they're looking at that. This will push people over. Like, why would you go out and spend $400 on a Nintendo Switch OLED when you can just go spend $450 on a Nintendo Switch 2? It just literally doesn't make any sense. The other thing here, which people still denied, and you can look at history, that this has never happened before, where last gen consoles and stuff have increased in prices. But obviously, the whole tariff situation is playing into this. You look at where these consoles are manufactured, and that is going to have an effect on how pricing happens. I mean, this is Daniel Mod here on X saying 20% tariff on Vietnam, 30% tariff on China, 15% tariff on Japan, all markets that Nintendo relies on for hardware and software production. Wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo ended up raising the Switch 2 prices at some point as well. And that obviously plays a role in it in some factor or another, no matter how much people want to deny that that plays a role in it. It does. And you could think, well, why are they not raising the price of the Switch 2 in the last gen? Is because they're trying to subsidize in one way or another the costs of the Nintendo Switch 2, and they're doing it with the Nintendo Switch 1. I think that's a major thing that is going into this. And they don't want to turn off customers from buying a Nintendo Switch 2 by already raising the prices on a console that the market already thinks is somewhat overpriced, although the purchasing decisions have not proven that people even care about the prices of the Nintendo Switch 2. So they're raising the price of the Switch 1. This happened in Canada, this happened in the United States, and this will potentially continue and move on to the Switch 2 at some point. But as of right now, the Switch 2 is selling very well, and maybe they also don't want to slow down those sales because the Switch 2, in terms of sales, have actually doubled the first month sales of the original Nintendo Switch. They've sold almost 6 million units of the console itself, which is pretty crazy. This console is going to sell very, very well throughout its entire lifespan, I think, unless it just completely falls off and all the enthusiasts have bought it within the first month. But I don't think so. I think it is going to do very well. They say following its launch in June, the Switch 2 console has now sold 5.82 million units, according to Nintendo's Q1 earnings report, more than double the 2.7 million unit sales achieved by the original Switch in its first month. And because Mario Kart World was attached to many of the people who did buy the console, Mario Kart World has also sold over 5.63 million copies worldwide in the first month since it has been out. So Nintendo's sales, very good. And we look at like the whole exclusive, the first party stuff, why this differs from Xbox and PlayStation is because the development costs. Like, I do not believe the development costs of Mario Kart World come close to the development costs of some of the first party PlayStation or Xbox games. So their profit margins on these games are probably insanely good. They're selling very well, cost less to produce. That's kind of a place that I think Xbox and PlayStation want to get to at some point, and they're doing different things in their ecosystems and in their business to try to get there. But I am going to end the video there. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up. If you are new here, hit that subscribe, and I will catch you guys in the next video.